Hey Keto friends, today we're going to be making a chocolate peanut butter cheesecake. It's a favorite of mine. I've made it at least 3 times in the last month, and I'm making it again for a dinner party I'm going to tomorrow night. So let's get started. So first we're going to start with the chocolate crust. I'm going to put in the almond flour, cocoa powder, Swerve, also the Erythritol, and then 3 tablespoons of melted butter. We're just going to mix this all up. So this is what the base should kind of look like. It's still moist and crumbly, and we'll be able to press it into the pan. So I'm using a 9-inch springform pan. I've lined it with parchment paper, but you can also grease it if you prefer. And I'm just going to pour my crust mixture into the pan. And then we're going to really tightly pack it in. So try to distribute it evenly. And once that's done, I like to use the back of my hand or a spoon just to really pack it in. Okay, so now that my crust is all pressed, it's ready to go into the oven, which is preheated at 325. And the crust should take about 10 minutes to bake. So while the crust is in the oven, we're going to move on to the filling. So I've started adding my 3 blocks of cream cheese to my mixer, and as you can see, I've been using the whisk attachment. So with those 3 blocks in, we're going to whisk on medium until the cream cheese is smooth. So the cream cheese should be smooth and without any clumps, and also make sure you use it at room temperature. So leave it out on the counter for about an hour prior to making your cheesecake. Okay, so now that our cream cheese is smooth, fluffy, and ready to go, we're going to add half a teaspoon of salt and the sweetener. And then we're going to mix that up. So next, the vanilla goes in. And we're going to beat that for 30 seconds. And then we're going to add 1 egg at a time, and we're going to beat for a minute in between. Again, your eggs should be at room temperature, just like your cream cheese was. So I'm just stopping it for a minute to scrape the sides and just make sure that I've incorporated everything into this before we continue on with the recipe. We'll just beat it for another 20 seconds or so. And at low speed. Okay, so our last 3 ingredients are going to go in. This is all natural peanut butter, so the only ingredients that should be in your peanut butter in this recipe are peanuts and salt. Sour cream. Check also, when you're buying sour cream, check the carbs, because even if they're full fat, often you'll get a pretty high carb count. So just make sure you double check that. This one actually has less than 1. And then I'm gonna add the heavy cream. So I'm going to, again, beat this on low for a few minutes, just until everything is blended really well. There are no streaks in the mix. Okay, so I say this looks perfect. So the last couple times I've made this, I've been really lucky, and they have turned out to be my best cheesecakes ever. No cracks, perfect. Let's see how it turns out today, now that we're filming this one. So our crust is just cooling. So as soon as it's cool, we'll be pouring the batter into the crust, and we'll continue from there. Okay, so we're gonna pour the cooled, the batter into the cooled crust. Looks good. So this recipe, we're gonna cook the cheesecake in a water bath. So I just use a large roasting pan, and you'll take your cheesecake, you're gonna place it in the middle, you're gonna boil some water, and you're gonna fill the pan up until it reaches about halfway of your springform pan. Okay, so our cheesecake is done. So it baked for an hour and a half in the water bath at 325. And then after that, we turned the oven off, opened the door, and allowed it to sit in the water bath to cool for another hour. So as you can see, no cracks, looks lovely. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna let it sit on the counter on the cooling rack for about 6 hours until it reaches room temperature. And then we're gonna just loosely cover it with saran wrap and refrigerate it overnight. Okay, so it's day 2. The cheesecake is done. It's chilled and ready for us to make the chocolate ganache. So we're just gonna move over to the stove. Okay, so I'm gonna turn the stove on to a very low heat. Place the pan, and we're gonna pour the heavy cream into the pan. So we want this to barely simmer, just warm enough that when we pour it over the chocolate will melt. So it's been about 4 minutes, and you can start to see the cream is heating up just by along the sides, bubbles. So we'll just give it another minute or two. You don't want this to boil. Okay, and that should be good. Okay, so I'm going to pour my chocolate into a pourable bowl. And I'm going to take my heavy cream and just pour it right on top of that chocolate. So we're going to let that sit. So while the chocolate is sitting with the cream, for the next few minutes, we're going to remove the springform pan. There we go. We're going to place the cheesecake on a platter so that we don't have to move it again after we pour the chocolate on. So after a few minutes of the cream and the chocolate sitting together, they will blend very well, and it should only take a few minutes for you to get it into this texture. It's nice and creamy and smooth. I also added a pinch of kosher salt. So once that is smooth and shiny, we're going to pour it over our cheesecake and just allow it to kind of drizzle freely over the edges. Okay, so here we go. So you should allow enough time for the chocolate to sit on the cheesecake in the fridge for at least 45 minutes prior to your guests eating it. And voila! Chocolate peanut butter cheesecake.